really a true and deep privilege, and I am beyond humbled and honored to be here. Especially because I have boys, so this is my great chance to come back to Burke's and figure out what on earth that window is for. Because they built this gym when I was in, I think, 4th grade, 5th grade, and we never knew. Now I know, 28 years later. So I was asked to spend 10 minutes talking to you today. And I have the great fortune in life of having as my sister-in-law, Morgan Howson, who I know you guys all know well, right? And I heed her wisdom well. And what she said to me is, she said, if you're gonna be up on stage, spend the time talking to the class of 2015. Because that's actually what Pansy Day is for, is to give them some words of wisdom as they go into the new chapter of their lives. So I'm gonna talk to you guys, and everybody else out there, you are invited to eavesdrop. Forgive me, I'm gonna kind of do what you're never supposed to do, right? So here's the plan. We have 10 minutes together, and I want this to be practical and useful. So we're gonna do 3 things. The first thing is, I'm gonna help you guys do something that it took me 26 years to do after graduating from Burke, and you're gonna do it today. The next thing we're gonna do is, we're going to do a 1-minute life planning exercise, and you're gonna have a plan for your future. And then the third thing we're gonna do is, I'm gonna attempt to distill some research that my colleagues and I have been doing for the past 2 years that is described in a 65-page academic paper, and I'm gonna try to crunch it into a 5-minute crash course for all of you guys on how to live a creative life. So, Michelle said I'm not afraid to fail. I know I'm gonna fail, but we'll try. Okay. First thing is, the most amazing thing about getting this award was that Michelle and Connor and the folks who organized the alumni lunch asked me if I wanted to have my parents come. And I hadn't thought that was gonna be an option, so I asked them and they said, we'd love to come. And it gave me this opportunity a couple months ago to stand up in front of a large crowd of people at a microphone and look at my dad and my mom, and 26 years after graduating from Burke's, look them in the eye and say, thank you. And to acknowledge the fact that I now know that there were many sacrifices, big ones and small ones, that they did for 9 years that were all about giving me the kind of opportunity that you guys have gotten to go to a school like this and get this kind of start in life. So I'm going to teach you something I learned, which is called a silent applause. Do you guys know this? Okay. And I'm going to ask you to stand up, because you probably need some blood in your brains, right? So here's the request. I want you to look out into the audience and find a parent, a grandparent, an adult in your life that deserves this level of thanks and recognition. I want you to stand up as a group and give them some silent applause. Okay, thank you guys. I am so happy. I'm glad you did not wait 26 years like I did. Okay, next part of our project here is let's make a life plan for you. Now, when I was your age, there were a lot of people asking me, what do you want to do with your life? Like, what do you want to do with your career? Do you want to have children? What's it going to be like? And my advice, now that I'm looking backward at all of that, is my advice when you think about your future is to think more about who you want to be rather than what you want to be. And what I mean by that is, rather than focusing on what career you want to have, what job you want to have, what kinds of things you want to own, or what kinds of things you want to do, when you think about your future, think about what kind of character you want to embody and what kind of person you want to be in the world. Because quite frankly, the world is changing so fast that we can't even predict right now the kinds of jobs that are going to be available to you when you are ready to enter the workforce. But if you focus on your character and you focus on the kind of person you want to be to others, that can always be a guiding post to you. So from this moment forward, your life is like a branching tree. So every day, all day long, you have choices. Do I go on that date? Do I say yes or no? Do I sign up for the hard math class or the easy math class? Do I go on the camping trip? Do I say that terribly cruel thing in my brain to that person that I so desperately want to say, right? It's all choices, one after another. And your life could branch in a million different directions, many of them wonderful. And it's helpful to have something that's guiding you along. So we're going to do a little quiet exercise. And I want you to think about this fundamental question of who do you want to be? Do you want to be a good person or do you want to be want to be a good person, right? But what does being a good person mean to you? I mean, what does it really, really mean to you? And here's my promise. I am not going to ask you to write this down. I'm not going to ask you to tell any of your neighbors. This is just a private, to yourself moment. What I want you to do is close your eyes. I want you to picture your most favorite font on the computer. And I want you to think of one adjective that describes to you what it means to be a good person. And it can be very different things. It could be that to you, being a good person is being a kind person. It could be that it's being generous. It could be that it's being determined. Whatever it means to you, but just pick one adjective right now. See it in your mind. See it in your favorite font. Okay, that's your future. That's the plan. Grow into being that person. Be that person today, tomorrow, and for the rest of your future. Now you have a future plan. Part of my minutes at the mic are to comically try to give you a crash course in being creative once I get the mic fixed. Okay, so why on earth would you want to be creative? So, I mean, this means a lot to me. As Michelle mentioned, I've been spending the past 3 years of my life at the Bay Area Discovery Museum with an amazing group of colleagues helping to try to understand how creative thinking develops in kids. And we have had the privilege of working with academics from all around the world. We have an advisory board that blows my mind. We work with academics from Stanford, from Harvard, from Yale, from Berkeley, neuroscientists, cognitive psychologists, economists, educators, all kinds of different people. And we just finished a paper where we summarized 150 different empirical studies that were all looking at really what we can do to promote creativity and creative thinking in the generation that's growing up today. So we came up with all these recommendations, but I got it down to 5 tips for you. So the foundational ideas are, first of all, what I mean by creativity is being a creative person isn't necessarily just about like arts or painting or whatever, right? It could be, but it's really about being the kind of person who finds interesting problems to solve. Rather than being the kind of person that walks into a job or a school and gets a problem handed to you and then figures out the solution. So what life is really like is a bit more like you walk into a situation and you have to walk around and look and figure out what on earth is an important problem that needs to get solved here and what kind of solution can I propose. So start being the kind of person that finds interesting problems to solve. And when I say a creative solution, what I mean by that is it's a solution that's unusual, that's unique, that might even be a little bit surprising, but that actually works. So one great creativity researcher I know explains, like, if you want to have a unique way to pave your driveway, don't pave it with salami, because that is unique. Nobody else is going to have a salami paved driveway, but actually it doesn't really work, right? Like, it gets dirty and smelly and it doesn't work at all, right? So being creative means coming up with something unusual and surprising, but also it works. The last thing is everyone has tremendous creative potential. It is a terrible and silly myth that there's some small group of creative geniuses who are just born with this creative talent. It's just not how it goes, right? What happens is you can grow and practice your creative skills throughout your life. And the people who practice creativity are the people who become amazing creative problem finders. So here's 5 ways to practice your creativity. Here's the 5 tips. Okay, the first one has to do with motivation. So we learn a lot in our research about the difference between internal motivation and external motivation, right? So my advice to you guys is start figuring out what you are really interested in. Like, what are you curious about? Of all the books you read at Burke's, which one did you like the most and why? And asking yourself those kinds of questions helps you get in touch with what we call intrinsic motivation. That's something where it's just like, yeah, it's not because I'm going to get a prize for saying that. It's not because I'm going to get an award. Nobody's going to pay me. I just really find that topic interesting. I really care about that issue. And if you can start to get in touch with those kinds of things to motivate you and drive you, it's going to help you, because then when you run into a rough patch and it's a really tough moment in a problem, like it is not easy to get to the next step, this is actually something that you are internally and intrinsically motivated to do and learn. So get in touch with your motivation. Second tip is about your idea tank. So my recommendation is cultivate your imagination. and start building up a reservoir of creative ideas. Build up your idea tank. So what I mean by an idea tank and how you do this is you try new and different things. And it doesn't have to be weird, odd, expensive, grandiose things, right? Like it can be, but it doesn't have to be going on a month-long outward bound course or taking trains through Eastern Europe. It can be something as simple as there's a Korean marketplace down the street from your house and you've never been in there, and you go in there and you get a sandwich that's a kind of sandwich you've never eaten, and you try it and you taste it and you think about what it tastes like. That's a new and different experience. Or you meet somebody who's born in a different country or born in a different generation, and you ask them about their life, and you hear about what their perspective on life is. Or you go to a place in nature that you go to all the time, and you give yourself a challenge of seeing something there that you have never seen before. Look deeply at the spider web. Look at the pattern on the ground. Find ways to find new and interesting pieces of information, right? And you don't just have to know exactly where they're going. But next, for your idea tank, you have to figure out how to capture it. So you can figure out what works for you. This can be like a box on your desk where you put interesting things that you find. It can be a notebook where you keep track of stuff. It can be Evernote. It can be your phone and you take pictures of interesting things. Whatever works for you. But successful creative people have good ways of capturing their ideas, even when they're not totally gelled. They're like half-baked ideas, right? Like something's interesting about this, I don't know what it is. So start figuring out new ways of getting exposed to interesting stuff, and then a way to capture and keep track of it. So you've got your idea tank. So you've got your motivation and your idea tank. The next thing is learn how to fail. I went to a conference recently and there was a big joke. It was like, F is the new A. And I thought that was really kind of like silly, but also kind of funny. But what the person meant by it was that honestly, you know, we do a lot for ourselves by embracing failure, failing forward, failing fast. So we talk a lot about not expecting to get stuff perfectly right the first time around. And I think if you can do things that you care about and accept at the beginning that you're going to fail a lot, you're not going to get it right the first time around, you're really not. But if you can do something, do your best job, and then be mindful of paying attention to what worked about it and what didn't work about it, and then doing it again, and then noticing what worked about it and what didn't work about it, and then doing it again, this is the kind of iterative learning and design process that is going to lead you towards wild success. But it takes a long time and it takes a lot of failure. And you've got to get comfortable with making failures. Not failures on that sort of being a good person, bad person type of stuff. Don't fail on that. But failures like, you know, take a really hard test. Try doing something that you haven't done before and be okay if you don't do it right the first time around, because it's about the long game. So my fourth idea is team up. And here we kind of get into all this weird stuff about we have this odd idea in our world, like there's these lone, solitary, creative geniuses who do everything on their own, right? Like you've heard of the Wizard of Menlo Park. So this is the Edison, who, you know, is known for inventing the light bulb, right? And there's this lore that he was like alone inventing the light bulb, and he's like this brilliant solo genius. Well, the truth is, he actually had dozens and dozens of people working for him. They were his muckers. They were machinists and engineers who built an entire upper floor of his building. He had a whole company coming up with ideas. He didn't have the first patent on the light bulb. He had a patent on a slight improvement to the light bulb, and most of his patents were shared with lots of people. But they realized that it was like this great marketing thing, that everybody loved the idea that he was like this lone creative genius who on his own came up with the light bulb, right? So they would go around with this story. And I think that's the thing, is like we hear this story about these creative people who are just like solo and doing it on their own, and it's not at all how things work. So I think the earlier that you can start practicing real collaboration with other people and figuring out, and it is really hard to do. I have a hard time working in teams. Everybody does. But you have to learn how to say, you know what, you're better at that part, I'm better at this part, or show me what your perspective is, or okay, I have an idea, can you add on to it? All those kinds of things. You're going to get practice in doing them, and the more you practice them, the more you will become a collaborator. And collaborators are the people who change the world. Because honestly, one of the best ways to make change in the world is to find a weird lone nut out there who's got a great idea and have the courage to stand up and be the first person to follow them and say, I will help you, I like what you're doing, I'll follow along. So collaborate. And the last piece of advice is about timing and picking your moments. Okay? So I think one of the reasons why we shut down in our creativity is sometimes we choose to be creative at a really bad moment, and it's a really bad failure, right? So I would say, in a few years, you guys will take the SAT. Don't pick that as a day to be creative. Seriously, it's like really important test. Like, I don't have like weird ideas on the SAT, right? And start developing discretion around like when you want to be creative and when you don't want to be creative, or when it's going to be a successful opportunity to come up with an unusual and surprising idea, and when it's not going to be a successful time to do that. And it takes a little bit of practice to get that, and you're going to make mistakes, but make those mistakes and learn. So those are my 5 tips. The recap is find your own motivation, fill up your idea tank, fail fast, fail all the time, get over failing as a problem, team up with other people and learn to collaborate, and pick the right moment, pick your timing. Because the biggest learning that we had from this whole study was great. It was like, there was like all these studies about how do we make kids more creative, and the most simple, powerful thing, and this is so silly but so powerful, was that if on the instructions in the paper or the assignment it says, be creative, then everyone will be creative. So in closing, I decided that I would just use this speech as me giving instructions to you, and imagine that I'm giving instructions for your life, and the instructions are, be creative. Go out and do it, and the world lies ahead for you. I'm excited for you guys. Thanks for having me. This is fun.